Does she know whose house this is? Was? Oh, man. Oh, that is a conversation that I would not want to be around for.
In 2012, Sinister became a modern horror smash. Blending supernatural dread with gritty, nightmarish realism, it quickly became a fan favorite that's still talked about today, especially after a scientific study named it the scariest movie ever made. But making those scares work on the screen wasn't always the easiest process. How did the infamous Super 8 films come together? Which horror icons helped shape the character of Bughuul? And is it really the scariest movie ever? Let's fire up the projector and try to stay as far away from Bughuul as possible as we explore what the f happened to Sinister.
But bad things happen to good people, and they still need to have their story told. They deserve that much.
You're a real man of the people.
Oh, come.
Screenwriter C. Robert Cargill got his start as a critic reviewing films for Ain't It Cool News, a position where he says he learned what works well for a film and, well, what doesn't. He referred to it as his college experience, and any negative comments he'd receive on the site were the equivalent of bad grades. But it wasn't all negative comments. What started out as positive comments on Twitter resulted in director Scott Derrickson reaching out to Cargill after becoming a fan of his reviews and realizing that they had similar taste in films. Scott Derrickson got his start directing the direct-to-video sequel Hellraiser Inferno and the supernatural courtroom drama The Exorcism of Emily Rose. While his resume up to that point showcased his talent for stylish horror, his next project ended up being a personal story for him. The Day the Earth Stood Still was a disaster on and off screen, leaving Derrickson feeling mentally depleted and like he needed to step into a more creatively liberating environment for his next project. As Derrickson's search for that fresh start, Cargill's thoughts kept circling back to a nightmare that he had years earlier, a dream sparked after watching The Ring. Disturbed by the film's content, the screenwriter dreamt about finding Super 8 snuff films in his attic. So, in a roundabout way, Bughuul owes his existence to Samara. Not exactly the crossover anyone asked for, but we'll take it. In January 2011, Cargill and Derrickson both happened to be in Las Vegas, where they met for drinks at the Mandalay Bay Casino. During their conversation, Cargill pitched the idea for Sinister under the working title Found Footage. Derrickson immediately loved the concept, and the two soon wrote the screenplay together. The script eventually found its way to producer Jason Blum, who had been hoping to work with Derrickson after becoming a fan of The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Blum agreed to finance the film through Blumhouse for just $3 million. While that budget was modest by Hollywood standards, it came with the promise of complete creative freedom. Blum also felt that Found Footage was a misleading title. Since the film wasn't actually a found footage movie, and audiences might feel confused or disappointed. With Insidious having recently become a major box office hit, Derrickson settled on another one-word title, Sinister.
Well, what can I do for you?
Well, not much, I expect, unless I can convince you to load those boxes back on that truck and leave as soon as you're able.
No, I don't think so.
One of the very first tasks that Scott Derrickson tackled during pre-production was finding the music for the Super 8 films. After spending days searching online and digging through horror forum recommendations, he discovered artists like Aghast and Ulver, whose haunting tracks became a defining part of the film's atmosphere. With Jason Blum's help, Derrickson secured the rights to 9 songs used throughout the film. He also incorporated music by Sun and Boards of Canada. Fittingly, the band's song Gyroscope was inspired by a nightmare. Marcus Owens said he wrote it while caught between sleep and wakefulness, allowing him to recreate the sounds from his dream. The track also incorporates recordings inspired by mysterious number stations, radio broadcasts long rumored to transmit coded messages to spies. Owen later admitted that the finished track still frightens him. Initially, Cargill envisioned the antagonist Bughuul as a more deranged take on Willy Wonka.
Mr. Wonka, I'm Violet Beauregard.
Oh, I don't care.
Hoping the character would come across as someone that children in the film might find captivating. Ultimately, the studio felt the concept was too silly to be frightening. Cargill later revealed that the figure he originally pictured actually resembled Mr. Babadook from the critically acclaimed horror film The Babadook. With a more menacing look in mind, Derrickson spent days combing through countless images on the photo-sharing website Flickr before narrowing his choices down to 15. He then sent the finalists to Cargill, asking which image he found the most unsettling. One photo, simply titled Natalie for reasons unknown, immediately stood out. They felt it had the eerie quality that they were looking for. From there, only minor changes were made. The figure was given a suit, his hair was made greasier, and his eyes were darkened. With that, Bughuul was born. Derrickson and Cargill contacted the original artist, paid $500 for the rights to use the image, and credited the artist with a concept art credit. At the center of Sinister's story is true crime writer Ellison Oswalt. Cargill explained that his name came from controversial speculative fiction author Harlan Ellison and actor Patton Oswalt, a self-proclaimed horror movie enthusiast. The character grew out of Cargill and Derrickson's shared fear of becoming so consumed by success that they'd sacrifice their own families in pursuit of it. For Derrickson, that fear intensified after his experience making The Day the Earth Stood Still, when he worried he might never find success again. Those anxieties helped shape Ellison into the flawed, obsessive character the audiences see in the finished film. This was one of the reasons that Academy Award nominee Ethan Hawke accepted the role in the first place. He said Ellison wasn't simply good or bad, but a layered, complex character, and after nearly 3 decades in Hollywood, he found the character's struggles deeply relatable. Like Jason Blum, Hawke was also eager to work with Derrickson after becoming a fan of The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Even so, he admitted that he was initially hesitant to star in a horror film, fearing it might invite negative energy. Once production began, however, he found the experience surprisingly enjoyable. Derrickson showed Hawke the infamous "Here's Johnny" scene from The Shining, but with Shelley Duvall's reactions edited out. His point was that Jack Nicholson's performance alone wasn't what frightened audiences. It was Wendy's fear that invited viewers to experience that terror alongside her. To capture Ellison's horror authentically, Hawke wasn't shown the Super 8 films beforehand. When the cameras rolled, he watched the completed murder reels, complete with their unsettling soundtrack, for the first time. So the reactions that you see on screen are completely genuine. Hawke had seen Juliette Rylance in a few plays over the years and thought she'd be perfect for the role of Ellison's wife Tracy. He mentioned her name to Derrickson, who was equally impressed by her talent, prompting him to cast her. In many ways, Rylance becomes a surrogate for the audience, delivering a restrained performance that keeps Tracy grounded and believable. As Ellison becomes increasingly obsessed with the house's history, Tracy remains remarkably composed. Well, more composed than I'd ever be if I found out my spouse moved our family into a house where brutal murders happened. Oh, and then lied about it. Yeah, you're sleeping on the couch for that one. Playing the role of Deputy So-and-so is the late James Ransom. Derrickson recalled struggling to cast the part, saying none of the auditions captured what he was looking for. Then he remembered Ransom from heavyweight dramas like The Wire and Generation Kill and offered him the part without an audition. Although Ransom wasn't known for comedic roles, Derrickson felt that he was the right fit. After speaking with the actor over Skype, he really felt that Ransom understood the film's delicate tone and exactly what he and the other filmmakers were trying to achieve. His performance walks a difficult line, making Deputy So-and-so funny without reducing him to comic relief. Ransom also gives the character a slightly goofy charm while never making him seem incompetent. Derrickson later said that the two things audiences responded to most during test screenings were the Super 8 films and Deputy So-and-so. Ethan Hawke agreed, later saying that, in his mind, Ransom steals the film. Vincent D'Onofrio shows up for a couple scenes as the uncredited Professor Jonas, providing some key information on Bughuul. D'Onofrio chose to go uncredited because his filming time was brief, saying he took the role for fun and as a favor to his friend Ethan Hawke. Although their characters interacted via webcam, Hawke stated that D'Onofrio was actually in the next room, allowing the two to exchange dialogue in real time. D'Onofrio shot his scenes in just half a day, and while his screen time is limited, his presence gives the film some weight and feels more natural than your typical exposition character. Cargill and Derrickson knew that they wanted Fred Dalton Thompson to play the role of the sheriff. They wanted the veteran character actor to bring his signature authority and that old western, get out of my town demeanor. He absolutely nails that vibe here. Since Ellison's past work has shed an unflattering light on the police, the sheriff absolutely feels compelled to retaliate and be as intimidating as possible. Of course, Ellison's about to learn that the sheriff is the least of his problems. For the role of Bughuul, aka Mr. Boogie, stuntman Nicholas King got the job by word of mouth. His father worked as a stunt coordinator on the film and told his sons about the audition for the antagonist. The audition itself was small, as it was only about 6 guys trying out for the role, including King and his brother. Derrickson chose King due to having the body type that he envisioned for Bughuul, tall but not too bulky. Additionally, his resume helped him take on the stunts needed to perform the part. King had previously worked on films like The Green Hornet and Paranormal Activity 3. Playing Bughuul, however, was a completely different challenge. King even got pointers from Jason Voorhees himself, Kane Hodder, a good friend of his father's. Hodder advised that his son step into a dark and depressed mindset while playing the part. King took the advice to heart and isolated himself from everyone on and off set. The restrictive makeup naturally helped, as it made it difficult for him to speak. That makeup took about 3 hours to apply and another 2 hours to remove, but it ended up being worthwhile, as it ended up shaping one of modern horror's most terrifying villains. Filming took place in the state of New York over a 5-month period. One of the production's major priorities was getting the snuff films and their deeply unsettling vibe just right. To accomplish this, Derrickson felt authenticity was the way to go. Rather than manipulate the footage digitally, he used actual 8mm cameras. The biggest challenge was that finding this type of equipment by the 2010s wasn't exactly easy. Rental cameras were available, but the footage consistently came back too low in quality, so cinematographer Chris Knorr ultimately purchased his own Super 8 camera, giving the production a reliable 8mm recording device for the rest of filming. Even then, Derrickson said the film would sometimes end up out of focus, and there was nothing he could do to change it, but it all paid off. The Super 8 snuff films helped define the film's atmosphere and left a lasting impression on viewers. The one titled Pool Party 66 was a challenge for the cast and crew to shoot. Nicholas King stayed underwater for 3 hours to get the shot right without having to touch up his makeup. He surfaced only briefly for air, relying otherwise on a small oxygen tank hidden beneath his sleeve. Additionally, he wore weights to restrict his movement. Because of the fickle nature of the Super 8 camera, the crew had to make sure its cartridge and light meter were working properly before rolling. There was very little room for error. The crew had only a limited amount of time to capture the shot, while the actors were strapped to the lawn chairs, literally being pulled underwater. While the previous sequence went off without a hitch, the hanging tree sequence proved to be a very different story. According to art director John L. Menahi, it became one of the production's most demanding effects. As the film's opening scene, the pressure was on to get it just right. The crew transported a full-size tree from Pennsylvania, modified it, and buried it on set specifically for the sequence. Al Menahi had concerns about the original stunt rig, but it was used anyway, leading to a series of setbacks as the team experimented with different approaches for the effect. Al Menahi's preferred design was a counterbalance rig attached to a crane that allowed performers to be raised and lowered while remaining supported rather than hanging freely. The stunt team also incorporated full-body harnesses similar to those used by performers in Cirque du Soleil. After numerous rehearsals and successful tests, the scene appeared ready to film. During one of the earlier, less safe attempts, however, a performer slipped out of a harness, causing the rope to tighten around his neck. Filming was shut down for roughly a week. Derrickson later said it was only the second time in his career that he had fired someone, dismissing the stunt coordinator because he felt the situation had become dangerously unsafe. He also admitted that it was one of the only major effects he hadn't personally overseen, and the incident taught him to monitor every aspect of production much more closely. The sequence ultimately took so long to complete that the leaves on the imported tree naturally turned brown and had to be repainted green to maintain continuity. Woof. Al Menahi also shared how the unsettling shot of the young boy crawling backward out of the box was achieved. Rather than relying on visual effects, the production used the child actor himself. To make the movement possible, Al Menahi took apart an ab roller and modified it into a custom rolling rig. The device supported the actor as he moved backward, allowing him to glide smoothly over the box without damaging the prop and creating one of the film's eeriest visual moments. The last special effect filmed was the bloody hallway sequence. While reviewing the footage, cinematographer Chris Knorr noticed that the Super 8 camera had caused parts of the image to fall out of focus. At first, he panicked, worried that they had once again captured unusable footage. But after watching it back, the crew found themselves pleasantly surprised by the result, feeling the blurriness gave the scene an even more unsettling quality. What initially seemed like a mistake ultimately became a happy accident, and the footage made it into the finished film.
You can never explain something like this. And if you were able to, the odds are you wouldn't much care for the answer.
Although the Super 8 sequences gave the home movies their disturbing realism, the rest of Sinister presented its own cinematography challenges. Knorr originally expected Sinister to be shot on film, but the studio ultimately insisted on shooting digitally. One drawback of digital cameras at the time was that darkening the footage in post-production often produced unnatural-looking images. To work around that, Knorr darkened many areas of the set instead, helping the film achieve its distinctive shadowy look. Because digital cameras were also highly sensitive to light, certain sets were draped in darkness to prevent unwanted light from spilling into the frame, which might explain why the Oswald house appears to have a total of 3 light bulbs, max. Though this was Knorr's first horror film, he approached it much like any other project. Months after filming wrapped and editing was completed, he attended the film's color grading session at a theater in New York, where Technicolor's system allowed the footage to be viewed live on the big screen. Working alone around midnight, Knorr found himself unexpectedly shaken as he watched the finished film. After spending months behind the camera, it finally dawned on him that they had made something genuinely frightening. Sinister was released on October 12, 2012. While it didn't debut at the top of the box office, it delivered a strong opening weekend, earning just over $18 million in the United States and Canada. By the end of its theatrical run, the film had grossed $48 million domestically and another $34 million overseas, for a worldwide total of $82.5 million against a modest $3 million budget. Even more impressive, it achieved that success without being part of an established franchise, unlike many horror hits that benefit from being sequels or remakes. Critical reception was also generally positive. The film holds a 64% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, while audiences gave it a similar 62%. On IMDb, users rated it at a 6.8 out of 10, although many critics took issue with the film's reliance on familiar horror cliches. Even several of its detractors agreed that Sinister contains genuinely unsettling and highly effective scares. Broadband Choices, a UK-based broadband comparison service, conducted an experiment in which 250 participants watched a selection of horror films while their heart rates were monitored throughout. Sinister produced an average heart rate increase of 32%. Participants began with an average resting heart rate of 65 beats per minute, which climbed to an average of 86 beats per minute over the course of the film. When asked about the result, Derrickson said that he believes the Super 8 films are so effective because of their mystery, and audiences only see the families and their gruesome fates, leaving much of what happened and why to the imagination. He believes that uncertainty creates a powerful sense of suspense. Broadband Choices repeated the experiment over several years, and Sinister held the top spot most of the time, only being dethroned in 2021 by Rob Savage's low-budget thriller Host. The ending of Sinister was always meant to be bleak, but Jason Blum insisted on one last jump scare before the credits, which is why Bughuul pops into frame like he hadn't sufficiently jump scared you for the last hour and a half. When talking about the film's bleak ending, Cargill defended it by comparing it to the endings of films like The Shining, The Omen, The Exorcist, and even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He argued that although Sally Hardesty survives the events of the film, she would carry the trauma of that experience for the rest of her life. While the ending didn't exactly leave room for Ellison to return, James Ranson reprised his role as Deputy So-and-so in the sequel. Unfortunately, Sinister 2 wasn't as big of a hit with fans or critics, although it still turned a respectable profit. Its box office performance wasn't strong enough for Blumhouse to fast-track a third installment. Derrickson and Cargill have both expressed interest in returning to the franchise and getting the quality of the series back on track, but as of now, there are no official official plans to continue. Derrickson said he wanted Sinister to be his version of U2's Achtung Baby, rather than trying to compete with other horror films by simply going bigger or louder. He wanted to take the genre in a different direction. He pointed to U2's landmark album as an example of artists who reinvented themselves instead of following trends, resulting in one of the most acclaimed works of their career. In the same spirit, Derrickson hoped Sinister would zig, while other horror films of the era zagged. Derrickson has also called filming Sinister one of the most satisfying experiences of his entire career. Having creative control on a small budget forced him and his crew to find innovative ways of achieving the final result. It also helped establish the Blumhouse model for the decade that followed, making legitimately scary movies on modest budgets that delivered impressive box office returns. Whether Sinister is actually the scariest movie of all time is ultimately up to you, but it's hard to argue that some of the film's most disturbing moments don't linger long after the credits roll. And that, my friends, is what the f happened to Sinister.
Don't worry, Daddy. I'll make you famous again.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. We're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.